We didn't practice who was going to speak first. But hello. Welcome to this incredible panel about making trash games for love. Real quick, we have a slide deck that should be up on your screen for folks. We welcome you to check out our slides, play along from home. We are also going to have some notes on there, and we have a slide with some honorable mentions of resources and links to some of the stuff that we'll be talking about. If we bring up anything that's not on those slides, I'll make sure to go in and add them post hoc. And this URL should be valid forever. So you are welcome to pull that up. It's like I said, the URL is going to be on every slide. So if you feel like we might have missed something, or you're like thinking back, like, oh, what was that thing that they mentioned? Make sure to write down that URL, and you can go and find that. We are going to get into it here. If I can make sure that the presentation is the active screen. Yeah, so we have on our screen a quick little agenda, some time breaks here. We'll go ahead and start with introductions. So my name is Taylor LaBresh. You can find me on Twitter at Leviathan Files. I am a podcaster and game designer. I run Riverhouse Games. And I also run Game Closet, an informal chat show with queer and LGBT plus folks in RPGs. I am a huge fan of trash, legitimate and otherwise. And I am very excited to be sharing my time here with some lovely co-hosts, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Olivia.
So I am Olivia Montoya, pronoun she, her. I am an enthusiastic jack of all trades. I am a zinester. I am a programmer. I'm a game designer / game dev. I experiment with all sorts of stuff and jump back and forth between a lot of different communities.
And I'm Jack Rosetree. I'm an indie game designer. I make lots and lots of games, many of them trash, and some of them hopefully not. And this is my first big panel, so I'm excited. And all of the imposter syndrome is here with me. So I hope you're ready to join me on this ride.
Hell yeah. Well, I am going to just jump us in here and go into Jack, do you want to give us a quick high
Yeah,
level of what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so the quick disclaimer is this is not a panel talking about the marketing of games, games in the industry, games sold as a product. This is games as art. And when you're talking about as art, it's not enough to just say that games can be art in one fashion or a fashion. You want games to be art in all fashions. And that means that it's okay to do it your way. It's okay to do it only for yourself, and it's okay to do it very badly or to be bad at it. Um, a point that I'm going to try and make is that the act of game design, whether there's a finished product or not, whether there's a sellable product or not, is still an act of artistic accomplishment. And we're all here for it. It can be very self-fulfilling. And so the concepts of good or bad art are mostly marketing terms. What we're asking about your game is, does it serve its purpose? Does it tell the story you want? Does it use the mechanic you want? You know, it's okay to make ugly, unmarketable, uncomfortable, downright bad games. Every game has a place in this universe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that really excites me about trash art is kind of a mention of indulgence, of like, and also like a freedom of removing yourself from like the trappings of what is quote unquote good or what is expected. Something that really makes trash art appeal to me is just like not having to care about some of those things and just kind of doing what feels right in the moment, or what is affirming to the idea of the art in my brain.
I do a lot of play testing, and I've gotten a few games to the table where somebody will say, "This is a Jack Rose Tree game. This has your voice." You know, there it's you can't pin it down as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And something I just love about trash games is, it's got an art to it, it's got a voice to it. You can talk to your audience through it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my favorite game experiences has been where within the scope of either the rule book or the game itself, the designer behind it is in your ear talking to you as somebody that's playing their game, as opposed to just as somebody who is experiencing a product that they've produced.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like it's something that it hasn't been censored or sanitized. Like corporate made corporate and slick and uh like made to appeal to the most number of people as possible. I feel like I like the things that are made for a niche, or
Mm-hmm.
and that niche could be really small, and like you can see what like you can really see the writer's voice in it. Like that's why I sometimes call these sorts of things zine games.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. It reminded me of something when I was still in college. I had a professor who really shaped a lot of my life and thinking about art, and she said that the best poetry is the worst poetry. Um, because there's something that's like very earnest and like vulnerable about writing bad poetry, and you can really learn a lot about like what is the author feeling and seeing and hearing in just like absolute just doo-doo caca horrible horrible poetry, like very cringe, and I love that very much. And I feel like that fits in, and I know that you've got a section on zine games, Olivia, and I'm very
Yep,
excited to hear
I
you
will
talk
be
more about that.
expanding on this.
Yeah. Well, why don't we go on to our next section here? um Again, I'll make sure that I've got the presentation as my main window. Jack, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, so I do a lot of playtesting. I am a mod for a virtual playtesting server. So my area is on, the practical side of design, getting design done. So when talking about trash games, it's really good to remember that there are no rules, there are no boundaries. This is your trash. Uh, be proud of your beautiful trash. A phrase I've been using a lot lately is make trash and be proud. Um, the idea that you need to adhere to certain constraints within design, I mean, those constraints exist for a reason. They have a value within a certain set. But when you're talking about something that you're making purely for yourself, purely as an act of love, you don't need to worry about those. A really good example is the title. I have a game this weekend that I'm demoing, and I gave it a different title in all of the playtests, not because I want to figure out which title is the best, but because that is part of the experience of the game. The game is about making weird questions. So the title is a different weird question every time. Uh, Darla, uh, what's the last name?
Burrow.
Burrow made a fantastic game called Dear Great Cthulhu, Please Stop Giving Me Superpowers. And it breaks a lot of rules about making a title for a thing, but it is a title where I feel like the designer is speaking into my ear and having a discussion with me on a level that other games wouldn't have. Like if you came up with a really witty kind of, there's a pun in the title and people, I don't want that. I want this weird long title that tells me a story. Um, so when talking about trash games, you want to design with a goal and purpose and confidence. Come up with why you're making it. Do you want to tell a story? Do you want to create a specific feeling? Do you want to utilize a specific mechanic or be a specific thing? A good example of being a specific thing is edible games. If your entire game is edible, build everything towards that. Make your instructions edible, make your components edible. Tell the players that they should throw food at each other as a tiebreaker. Who knows? um but focus in on the purpose of that, the thing you want, and everything else is band-aids and duct tape. Just make it work. If you have a particular feeling that you want to get across, build towards that feeling and then don't worry about the rest. A great example is Apples to Apples is a very popular game. It builds around a particular kind of party mechanic and vibe, like kind of there's a jokey and like a creativity, and then there's the points which exist basically because they have to, and that's it. You don't worry about it. And so what I when I'm approaching these trash games, the minimum viable product is the product. I want to get something out there so I can get people experiencing that thing that I was really, really excited about. And doing these trash games, like this is how we find really weird stuff, really unique stuff, innovative stuff, cathartic stuff. Um, it's how we expand the market in a way that feels great. And to go back to what I said earlier, the act of game design without a final product is still an act of artistic accomplishment and can still be very self-fulfilling, and I love it
Hmm.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you find someone who really connects with your hyper niche, like super specific thing, it's like you get super excited and you might have made a new friend.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I almost wonder if there is I oh goodness, I had a question going on this and I lost it, but a little bit of what I was thinking about is like the finished state. Like what do we think is quote unquote success for a trash game? Because like I think that the three of us have unique perspectives on this
Hmm.
and I think this is a great time to bring this up is like when we think about like creating a trash game, like what does that like what do we think of in our minds when that happens? Because like practical trash and going back to your bullet point too earlier is like does it achieve its purpose? So I'm really curious, Jack, to like get your perspective on like when you see that product or that finished thing
Hmm.
like with a trash game, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, and again, does it serve its purpose? If your goal is to tell a story, tell that story and get out. That's
Hmm.
that's that's how I've been handling it a lot lately. And that's not to say you can't go back and expand upon it, but when you're talking about the initial creation of these trash games, um, a good example is one of the Golden Cobra winners last night is a game called Melt Me, which is about sensually eating ice cream over Discord to simulate having sex in a gay bathhouse in Japan. And there's a very particular feeling and a very particular story they are telling with this game. I absolutely love it. And again, the rest is all duct tape and band-aids. Maybe they want to go back and they want to expand upon this, but there's a very specific emotional feeling that they are getting out of this game. And once you've achieved that, like fire it off, like send it out into the world, share it with the universe, because that's that's a great place to be. um you know it doesn't have to be fun, it doesn't have to be mechanically resolved, or you don't even have to have winners or losers. I have a number of games where I just slap a winner on the end that has nothing to do with what happened throughout the course of the game. um and I think as soon as you hit that minimum viable product, share it with the world. Like recognize that it doesn't need to be refined. It doesn't need to be cleaned up. Like it can be rough around the edges.
Hmm. And I'm particularly curious to see your distinction between like a finished minimal viable product that is a trash game and something that you are still like making and you're like this
Mm.
is a trash game but it isn't quite there yet. Like what is the difference between a finished trash game and a maybe like a trashed trash game?
Wow, that's a little difficult. They're all on a spectrum, really.
Sure.
Like, a lot of my games start out as trash games and either develop into something else, or they start as something else and I eventually come to somewhere else. Most of them start with I have a design conceit or a design goal. So like one that I'm working on right now, which there's a picture of, is a two-player make it as complex as possible game. Basically, what I would love for somebody to eventually say about this game is it's pretty good for a game made out of problems.
Mm.
It includes a chess set, it's got a poker deck, it's got a racetrack, it's got a resource deck, it's got worker placement. It's this massive sprawling thing. And you know what? Like, it may never see the light of day, or maybe at some point one part of it will eventually like pull out and become a real thing. But again, whatever happens, it's an act of art and love to make these things and to work on these things. And you know, if your goal is to create a game, you're probably playing the game a little bit wrong.
Hmm.
Your goal should be get a thing that you want to share with the world out into the world, if that's your goal. Like, art can be something that you just hang on the wall and is just for yourself. That's totally fine.
Hmm.
um
Also, like, sometimes playing the game of designing a game can
mhm.
be that can be the whole point, is that making a game can be a game in and of itself.
Yeah, I love that. Can you say just a little bit more on that? Because we have a little bit of time net left before your section, and I want to hear more about that thought.
So, well, the thing that comes to mind immediately is um, John Cole's LARP jam, which is it's a system for running a game jam, but there's a paragraph in there that's it says, like, treat this system as if that's a game,
Mm,
like if you run LARPs, like, treat this as if it were a LARP itself, like, and learn to be playful, and like, put down some of the barriers you've put up around, uh like, how can I act in the real world. This is like a magic circle where you get to uh be someone else. You can do things that you don't need permission.
mm,
Mhm.
You don't need permission to be someone who you aren't usually like.
mhm.
It's like, create a space where you can do things without feeling like, be creative without feeling guilty about it.
Hell
Right.
yeah.
There's been this growth of like a number of like kind of meta kind of games for making games. Like the jam that's going on this weekend literally was they rolled some dice and came up with some weird constraints, and now people make games based on that constraint. There's a game called, I think there's a game literally called Unpub, and it's just you make up a game and you pitch it similar to like a snake oil or a bad medicine. And I played it once, and the game I pitched, because I love this stuff, was a game that you could only play if you had 6 arms and incredible strength and all this other stuff. And one of the questions that I got was, well, what can you say about the accessibility of this game? And my response was, well, there is none.
Yeah.
Like,
It is
you
not accessible for
it is not
anyone.
accessible for anybody unless they have 6 arms and there's the size of a bus, and also they have an advanced degree in Newtonian physics.
Yeah.
Like, and I love theory crafting at that level where there are no rules, and you can,
Mhm.
things don't need to be fair. Fairness is overrated. You know, there's been a few times where I've had the opportunity to design something that was fair into my game, and I'm like, but that's not part of the voice. Like,
Mhm.
this game has a particular voice, and I would rather do something that fits that voice than to do something that is mechanically sound according to mechanical academics.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we'll move topics a little bit here.
Hmm.
Let me there we go. And start here. Olivia, I know you've got a couple slides here, so when you want me to, just give me a heads up on next slide, or if you want to go back, let me know.
Oh, yeah, sure. So this is my section where I want to talk about trash design encouragements and community. So, like, places that communities and spaces out there that encourage you to uh, make trash and, like, make it proudly, and like, revel in that and in other people's trash. Essentially, be a raccoon. So one of these is zine culture. Zine culture isn't just about RPG zines. Zine culture is something that has existed independently for decades, where it's a community of people who make these self-published booklets, and they can be about anything, like literally anything. Like I've seen a zine that's about whether or not like Godzilla or King Kong had worse smelling breath, and that was the zine. And there's an audience for it. So what can we learn from this zine culture? Like there's some things that are very common across zine culture, like the DIY ethos, do it yourself. But there's this community of people that you can interact with, learn things from, share with, trade with. So do it yourself, but together is one of the things that I like to say that we can learn from zine culture as games people. And another one of these lessons from zine culture is appropriate/steal what's useful and remix it. So they're like essentially create a Frankenstein monster if you want to, like with lots of moving parts, like take something, like hack things together, create something where you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And also another lesson is that sharing is caring, but care for yourself in how you share. So you get to have control over how you distribute your game, if at all. So like if you do choose to share with other people, something positive will almost certainly result if you're like within a supportive culture like this. But you could also say like, I'm going to make a few copies of this game and give it to my friends, and that's the extent of how I'm distributing it. Or do like upload it to itch.io, let people download it or set a specific price for it. And you get to set your own rules for copyright. Like that's another thing that the zine community is big on. Like you get to set different rules, like for like whether like you need my permission to copy this thing or make a hack of it or reprint something. Or they sometimes use terms like copyleft or anti-copyright if they want people to take their stuff and do something with it. Some people use like various gradations in between those, like Creative Commons licenses, but you get to choose how people interact with your work. And then one of the most important things is don't worry about how good or accomplished you are. Like that's one of the most profound lessons that I've learned from zine culture, is that everyone has something that they can put out there, and that they shouldn't feel like they have to have done something important or like recognized by society in order for it to be worthwhile to write. Like I teach zine workshops, and one of the most common things people come up and tell me about is that they feel like they shouldn't make a zine because they haven't like done anything important, and that like it makes them feel like imposter syndrome, like
Mm.
um they feel guilty almost about wanting to make a zine, and they feel like am I being too selfish or self-indulgent? And that's not the case at all, because there is an audience for literally everything. I have seen this in zine culture, like the weirdest, most niche, most specific, trashiest zines, there's always someone who wants it. And what I tell people if they're still like not sure about it is, well, you have an audience for your game because I want to read your zine.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And also another lesson from zine culture: F capitalism. Basically, it doesn't have to be commercial in order to be worthwhile. And
Mm-hmm.
also, you want to be able to create community by trading skills, materials, and final products. And another thing that's common in zine culture is using sliding scale prices. And that's something that I've been seeing popping up elsewhere. And it's great. Like, and also stuff like community copies is coming from the indie RPG scene, on itch especially. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's great and very zine-like. And another thing that we can learn from specifically queer zine culture is how, and other marginalized groups within zine culture, is that you can connect with people who are like you in like these specific ways that if you don't have these people around you in your like in your physical life, you can connect with them across the distance through trash design, through making zines, through making games. Like I have found some of my greatest friends through like hyper specific game design. So next slide.
Yeah.
Just to jump in there, I have a one-page adventure that's it's like a solo thing. It's called It's 1993 and you're sitting alone in a hotel pool. And the description page says it's 1993 and you're sitting alone in a hotel pool. And then the like everywhere that I can possibly write that phrase, like I even wrote it as a comment myself. And the adventure got 2 comments. One is this very well thought out review of it that says like this is really awesome and here's what it reminds me of and people should check this out. And then the other comment is someone who wrote it's 1993 and you're sitting alone in the hotel pool. And I'm like, there are 2 people here. I appreciate both of them, but one of them I feel like I have a connection to, and the other one I just appreciate that they played my game. And I think trash games have that opportunity for very interesting communication pathways that you cannot make with with people through other means.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is game jams and also sort of National Novel Writing Month, because that's sort of a game jam. And what can we learn from them? So if you are unfamiliar with game jams, they are events where the whole point is to make a game or games in a short period of time, usually with a theme. And that short period of time, that's relative. It can be anywhere from, like, I've seen game jams where it's like you have half an hour, make a game in that time, or up to months. I've seen game jams that have, in fact, there's even some game jams on itch.io right now where it's like this game jam lasts 10 years, and it's a gimmick, but it's like it's brought people together. And sometimes they're ranked and have winners, and sometimes they don't. And I tend to prefer the ones that are low pressure and longer periods of time and have communities around them. So one of the first things I wanted to share is that game jams give an alibi for those scared to give up perfectionism. Alibi is this concept in the LARP scene, specifically the Nordic LARP scene, where it's like you need to be almost given permission to do things that in the LARP that you wouldn't do in real life. So it's sort of like that. Like it gives you an out. Like you have permission to give up perfectionism for the sake of the jam. And it can give that extra little push for people who are afraid. And also, one other thing I've noticed through game jams is that shared goals or themes can drive a community. In fact, how I got into making games like as a serious hobby in the first place is because I joined a game jam and I scrolled down and saw, there's a Discord server connected to this. And that was the first time I ever joined Discord. And I have gone so far since then. And I made friends. I stayed up late and talking with them, and we shared resources for making games and talked about identity. Like, it was great. And so whether you're working on a team or even just as a solo designer in this sort of game jam sphere, you'll end up making new friends if you like enter the community spaces. And another thing that game jams are great for is smashing executive dysfunction. So if you have trouble starting things or changing activities or planning things, game jams can provide a useful framework and an extra little push to get you started, that overcome that inertia. It's that little push. So and there's a lot that can be said for making something imperfect but finished in a short period of time, rather than working on a long-term game project that remains unfinished forever. Like the trash that you publish through a game jam, uh, like you can expand on it later. Or it can just stay in the state it's in now, and people can get something out of it, even if it's not perfect. I get something out of imperfect things all the time. Like, that's why I'm so like committed to zine culture, is because like I get something out of it. even
Mm-hmm.
though everything is imperfect. And in fact, I
Mm-hmm.
prefer the things that are imperfect because that's what makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to point out that there's a game jam coming up called Finish Your Damn RPG Jam. It's on itch.io right now. You can sign up for it. Over 200 people have signed up for this already because a lot of people have the perpetually unfinished project, and this is like, just get it done. And this is the message you've been waiting for, to get it done, and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it with all these other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so another note about refining games after submitting them to a jam. This is really common with the Golden Cobras that have been mentioned before. Like, I've seen people submit a game to their use the jam period as an excuse to like actually get playtesting done, and then after they've gotten feedback from people who have played the game as a result of seeing it in the jam, then they can make a little bit more polished version that they upload to somewhere else. And this is also common with the Peaky Midwest LARP writing event and Iron GM, which is associated with Intercon. Lots of people create games in a very short period of time with a group of cool new friends in a lot of cases, and then expand on it later, or some of them just end up in a back drawer somewhere, and that's okay, because like same with NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. I've never won National Novel Writing Month. I've never finished anything from National Novel Writing Month, but I don't regret it. I don't regret ever trying it because I get something out of it every time, like cool new ideas that I'm like, I'm going to keep that and use it somewhere else. That like,
Yeah.
and so that's another thing about game jams. Like, I've never regretted participating in a game jam either.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. On the subject of game jams, especially with regards to trash games, is I would be remiss to say every year I run the Not a Game Jam, where you are encouraged to submit games that aren't games, whether that means that they're trash games or they're games that are written out of spite to someone, to spite that person in your comments saying this isn't a real game. So check that out in November. In 2 days, I'll be starting it, and it'll run through the rest of the year. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's a real subgenre of game jams now. It's game jams that are made completely out of spite.
yeah. So we'll move on a little bit here, and I'll get to talk about my favorite art forms, which are Dada, free jazz, and queer trash, a little bit, because I this is really kind of the things that I'm passionate about, and really have informed a lot of my game design over the past few years, and I have really seen a lot of people whose work also fills into this. This is the reason why I love running that Not a Game Jam. Um, is that there is in addition to the value of like making things quick, like that freedom of removing constraints, the DIY kind of like punk scene of the zine culture and everything, is that there's also just like a burgeoning world of art which is uh really kind of sits to challenge what we think about like quote unquote good or bad art. Is these art forms that are maybe like actively hostile to the viewer, whose art forms are annoying, are challenging. There's a really fantastic article that I will make sure to include in our little like footnotes slide, which again, this is a great chance to say, if you want to play at home, that slide deck is in the chat. It's also the tiny URL at the top right. You can go and check this out, that Bonnie Ruberg did as part of queer game studies. I can't remember exactly what journal it is, but it's like video games that are like actively difficult, like overly difficult, actively annoying, hostile to the viewer, and kind of what that does to queer what we think of as a game. Um, there are a bunch of artists in, I think, like the American 1920s and 30s that formed the school of Dadaism. This famous piece of art, Fountain, this photograph of a urinal signed R. Mutt, which was so infuriating to the art culture at large that it itself was either trashed or destroyed. The only image of it we have left is from photographs that people have taken of it, is this art that says, I am not art, or I am specifically there to frustrate folks who have opinions on what art is or what art can do. And I'm very much intrigued by the idea that trash games can do that. I want to get the name of it right, but there was a game jam run by a designer named Abe Mendez, and they're a fantastic designer. The game jam was the Valid Game Jam, which said that the only games that are actually valid as games are those games where the meat is stored on top of the refrigerator, which lets it be cold enough but not freezing for the baby to climb to the top of the refrigerator to get the meat. I think I got that wrong. I'm almost certain I did. But in the spirit of this game jam, I'm not going to correct myself. So that kind of like, this isn't a thing, but it's also a thing for you to view. And it's almost difficult. It's almost impossible to describe kind of these types of trash games, kind of almost by purpose. Like they are something that is not in themselves. And I think that that's something that's very interesting. Along those lines, there's almost this idea that it is inherently queer to make something that is quote unquote bad. There's a tweet that went viral a while ago that was just like, I'm queering my job by being bad at it. And I really want to apply that to game design. It's like I'm queering game design by effing sucking at it. I try to remain friendly here. But it's just like, we think about a lot of what we think is quote unquote valuable or is of value in a society which is primarily dominated by the heteropatriarchy. And this is where I'm going to get like really pretentious and spout off at the mouth. But art that challenges that and says, my purpose is to be bad. My purpose is to suck, is to just like be horrible to look at, be horrible to play, to be horrible to read, is a challenge to that and a way of bucking the way that we think about art in terms of that good and bad. So that's why we say good and bad are just marketing terms. There is no way to say this is a good piece of art. And even though there are many people who have valid ways to challenge that statement, the statement of there is no good, there is no bad art, the arguments to that statement are really kind of invalidated by the fact that that statement doesn't care. Like it says in itself, like, I don't care if there is a good or bad in art because there is no good or bad in art. It itself like exists as a challenge to what is good or bad in art. And I love games that are doing that. There's I 100% am sure that I'm getting the name of this wrong, but there's an RPG that was published a while ago, like in maybe the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s. If someone knows exactly what it is, that's great. I'll also do some research after this panel and include it in the slide deck, called Normalcy, which is an RPG that was written almost entirely by hand. So it's not a text typed RPG on the page. It's like handwritten notes. There's like coffee stains. Things are crossed out. You can't tell if the text is diegetic or in world or if it's instructional. It is a text of an RPG that exists to confound, annoy, and destroy the viewer. Like you really get that feeling of this is something that is hostile to me. I love games that can't be played, or games that destroy themselves as they're being played. It's not a tabletop RPG, but there's a video game called I believe it's called Queers in Love at the End of the World, where it's a twine game and you take on the point of view of one of maybe multiple queer lovers at the end of the world, and the game only lasts 10 seconds. You start it, and then after 10 seconds, the game takes you back to the beginning. And so it's a way of like challenging what we think of a game in terms of like, what is a story that has that arc to it, what is something that's playable, And then there's also just like the value of camp to things, like the Cats 2019 game jam, which was a delight to both participate in and see the results out of, which was like make a game that was inspired by Cats 2019, which is a horrendous mess of delightful indulgence. Remains one of my favorite movies of all time. Um, and I think the thing that I love the most about it is that you get bonus points if you somehow include game designer extraordinaire Lucian Khan in your game. Uh, a incredibly talented queer game designer who loves cats, both the animal and the film. And it just had this kind of like this strong trash feel to it and vibe that I love. One of the things that I do really love about camp as kind of an artistic sensibility, um, is the fact that it really requires it really requires you to not care about quote unquote good or bad. Part of the value of camp is that the art is bad, but you also can't try to make bad art camp because that defeats the purpose. It says camp is only bad on accident and it's only good on accident. Um, I'll touch quickly because I know we're getting to that 10-minute time here. Quickly on free jazz, which is another art form that I think really does this. My favorite free jazz album of all time is on the screen here. It's by the Peter Brotzman Quartet and it's called Machine Gun. It is a wall of sound. It's instrumentalists making noise as loudly as they possibly can. It's just this horribly dissonant assault musically, and it's fantastic, both in terms of listening to it because it's not like anything that you've ever heard before, but also kind of intellectually theoretically because it was written and performed in the 1980s in Europe as a direct response to the rise of fascism. um, and it kind of touches back on my ideas of this trash art is in direct conversation with the active modes and values and hierarchy of a society that is really kind of like hostile and dangerous to those who fit within that hierarchy. And so this is saying, we are making a piece of art that is a statement against the values that the fascists rising in the 80s have, and we are making this in a very specific way to assault their sensibilities. This is an attack on the rise of fascism in the form of this wave of sound and screaming jazz. I super love it. I love hearing about it. If you can read about it and listen to it, I really highly suggest that you do. I would also be remiss as a game designer if I didn't say that I wrote a game for the Record Collection Jam that is based off of this. It goes by the exact same name. I might include that in the notes at the end. And then I think we've touched on the value of amateurism a little bit in kind of our past segments, but I think that there's something very freeing to saying I do not have to make something good. I can just make something, and actively bucking kind of the trappings and the hostility of capitalism by not really caring about game as product and focusing on game as the art of creation or the game as the indulgence of creation. So I know I just talked for a long time. Before we get to our next segment, do you guys have any? I want to make sure that you
Yeah,
have
I
platforms
just
to
wanted to
expound.
throw one thing at that. Like, what we're saying here is not that you have to do one or the other. You can do
Mhm.
both. And like an artist can, go somewhere and work on a masterpiece mural that's taking them years to put together, and then they can come home and they can scrawl something on a napkin.
Yeah,
So
sure.
like, you can do work on the thing that you think might be marketable, might be a product, might be whatever. But you could also come home and like do trash design, and it's a way of practicing game design. It's a way
Mhm.
of like loosening up your restrictions, letting it go. And there are games on the market that have what I would call like trash design moments to them, where somebody wrote something and they were like, whatever, just leave it in. So there's a game, I
Mhm.
don't even remember which one it is, but the tiebreaker is the players go home, they each plant a seed, and in like 3 years, whichever one has a bigger tree wins the tiebreaker. It's like there are people that would be angry to hear that
Yeah.
tiebreaker because they want a tiebreaker right now,
Yep.
to solve it. But you know what? Like I like it. I want to plant a tree to determine whether or not I won this game
Mm-hmm.
3 years from now.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out that with the word amateur, it's like it comes from the idea of doing something because you love it, not because you are an expert at it.
Yep.
And there's something that can be learned from that. Like there's a lot of negative connotations to the word amateur now, but
Mm-hmm.
it comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
Like
Over the past year, I've stopped calling myself a professional game designer, even though I do make games and they do sell, and I do have an income that comes from that. It is not my day job. It's not who I am, and I really am more and more falling in love with the term of being an amateur game designer. So I am not a professional game designer. I'm an amateur game designer who happens to make money. We'll close out kind of the main section here kind of quickly. I know we went over on I think all of our sections, and I want to make sure that we have time for some of our Q&A. Jack, do you want to close us out with
Yeah.
some of these notes?
So this is just a little bit about getting your trash art out there and sharing it with people. Again, obviously, you can hang something on your wall and not share it with anybody. That's totally fine. Like the act of making games doesn't have to be an act you share with other people. But
Mm-hmm.
if you do, item number one, do not expect to make money and act accordingly. If you're going to spend money on any part of your game design, on making prototypes, that sort of thing, like it's better to consider it part of your entertainment or your hobby budget, something that you're not necessarily investing in. Um, uh, you know, prepare to do a little bit of everything yourself, and become an amateur at everything yourself. Like if you want your game to have some degree of graphic design or some degree of art or some degree of proofreading, just expect to do it yourself. You're probably not going to find people that are going to do it for you. If you look at the slides, there's an image of art that I made for a sock puppet inspired game. There are tricks that you can learn. There's tons and tons of help on the internet that will tell you how to do graphic design, how to set up layers, all that kind of stuff. Most of the things that I do, I learned over the course of like a 5-minute YouTube video. So it's not a huge investment of time. Um, uh, I I generally say don't steal anything because there's plenty of free options. But again, if it's just for yourself, do whatever you want. You can copy games and just change the theme and scrape off the serial numbers. That's up to you. Like it's art. You can do it yourself. And then finally, there's a lot of free options or free-ish options. There's print on demand, which charges a person for buying it as opposed to you for producing it and then selling it. There's print and plays, which people, print themselves. There's itch.io, which all three of us use to share our games in kind of a public space. There's building your own website. I have effectively a design portfolio website that just has links to all of my games. And then the big thing I've been using lately is Tabletop Simulator. Any of my games that are available in any format are available on Tabletop Simulator. You just apply the mod and then you can play it through there. Tabletopia is another option, but those do cost money for you to get your own copy. Tabletop Simulator is $20. I'm not sure about Tabletopia. Usually goes on sale for like $10, but the investment will save you. You have no idea how much money on prototyping costs. I can't tell you that much. If you have plans to play your game, playing it virtually is always going to be way cheaper than playing it live.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. So I did put a call in the chat here. We are taking audience questions for the rest of our time here. It looks like we've got 12 minutes left. We've got links to all of our stuff here, our social medias, our web portfolios. We really would love audience questions in the chat, so feel free to pop them in there, and we'll get them away. We did get one kind of at the top of the show from Jason, Genesis of Legend, in the chat. How much of trash games as a philosophy involves the concept of producing quantity to hone your skills versus intentionally boundary pushing experimentation?
I have a lot of trouble focusing on a single project at any given time. So I tend to do the scatter shot, like I'll work on this and then I'll work on this. Lately, I've been trying to get a little more focused on like having a finished product and not necessarily retail finished, but like just a playable game that I can share with other people and know that they're going to be able to play it without me. That's the big step for me is I want to get the game to a point where the instructions can be read by somebody without me being there to guide the experience.
Mm.
Unless guiding the experience is part of the game, in which case, have at it. But there's definitely like my make it as complicated as possible two-player game is definitely one of those intentionally boundary pushing experimentations. And it's something that I spend a little time on. I go do something else I spend a little time on, and so it's a little bit of everything. But choose what works for you. It's your art, it's your thing. We are very much encouraged when we're doing play tests to like accept player feedback. And when you are making a game that is marketable, that's probably a very prudent thing. If a player says I would never spend money on this, you want to listen to them. But when you're making a trash game, if a player says I would never spend money on this, great, good job. Like maybe this gave you enough of a feeling that I can still count it as a success. um okay. um but yeah, I think that would be my response to that.
I feel like there's room in the category of trash design for like quantity over quality type stuff where you make as much as you possibly can, as well as like intentional, like I want to mess with the player experimentation, like
Mhm,
anything that goes outside the boundary of like what is marketable, what is corporate,
Hmm.
what is something that you're intentionally putting out there to make money. And I feel like so many people, I they overlook this kind of stuff. And it doesn't get the kind of attention it deserves. But like I still love how there's niche community for these niche
mhm.
products.
Hmm. I
um
just realized I want to do a quick call out here. In the Twitch feed, it looks like a little bit of our slides were getting cut off, so I just moved the URL from the corner into the main screen of the page for folks. And if anyone's listening along, the URL to the slide deck is tinyurl.com/htnw669s.
and then with our last few minutes, I think we could each kind of g- give some shout outs to some trash games or trash mechanics we've really loved lately. One I want to point to is quite a few months ago, Humble Bundle came out with a game called The Corridor. And in the game, you load it up, you walk to the end of a hallway, you press a button, and a narrator says, "Don't ever play this game again," and the game closes.
Love it.
And it develops from there. I don't want to spoil anything, but it is a fantastic experience that, again, breaks a lot of rules when it comes to game design. A lot of games these days, especially, are like, hey, are you sure you want to leave? Maybe you want to play a little bit more. This one's like, no, get out.
Oh. Aldercone in the chat says that they have a kinship with this panel with so many projects going. Love that.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah, I procrastinate for working on one project by working on another project, and then jump and then switch back so that I'm working on the other project to procrastinate on the project I was procrastinating on that project with, and that's how I get things done.
Hmm. Hmm.
I also want to call out Medusa's hair bad day, which was a Golden Cobra's submission a few years ago from Kitty Stolsky. Um, and the idea in it is that somebody sits in front of a mirror and they're Medusa, and all the other players have sock puppets that play Medusa's hair, whispering encouraging and supportive things into Medusa's ear to help her, make it through her bad day. And
Hmm.
when I talk about design, like we have mentioned hostile trash design a lot, but I think emotional trash design can also be a thing because that is not a game that I would consider marketable in any way. It's not a game that people will necessarily play more than once or that you can write an adventure for, but it is a game that gives me feelings when I talk about it and when I explain the mechanics of it. And
Mm-hmm.
games that give a particular emotional response, I think, are a fantastic way to approach game design and say, like, you know what, I have this thing, this reality for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Darla's "Please Stop Giving Me Superpowers, Dear Great Cthulhu" does that because it's a game very much about disability and um, experiencing the mixed blessings and curses of the things that you know you've obtained throughout your life, and that is a story and an experience that isn't easy to convey to people just through direct speech.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a friend who I believe their Twitter handle is Beyond the Binary, or it I should remember. Actually, let me look this up. And I need to make sure that this is correct because I love their games, and they oh, no, it is not Beyond the Binary.
I believe I've been corrected. Darla's game is about disability and queerness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Just to make it clear. But definitely, that is one you should check out. Darla spent pre-Metatopia emailing everybody by hand because I guess their email system collapsed
Oh
at the
no.
worst possible time. So definitely give them some support because I'm sure they could use the extra encouragement.
Mm-hmm. We'll put out a last call for questions. We got 4 minutes, I think, before they give us a close.
Oh, one thing I want another example I could bring up of like a friendly trash game is one that I made that as a personal challenge to see, can I make a trading card game that isn't about fighting and is in the entire instructions and for the entire game are on a single card. And
Mm.
it's called Sticker Trading Card Friendship Game, and the whole point is to get you to meet people at conventions. And you just print out a bunch of copies of the card, and it helps if more people are playing it because there's some like trading mechanics, but you level up your card by collecting business cards from other people at the con.
Mm-hmm.
And it encourages you to talk to people.
Love that.
Absolutely. I also want to throw out there when COVID got started, I reached out to Doug Lewandowski, who is probably best known right now for Kids on Bikes, Kids on Brooms, that sort of stuff. And we put together a bundle of experimental games, and the pitch was basically like, we know a bunch of people that have games in their back pocket that they can't possibly sell, so let's reach out to all of them. We'll throw them into a bundle and we'll put it up online, and anybody that pays for it, the money's going to go to charity. And so that was a really great experience with basically like taking a bunch of trash games. They were all kind of social distancing friendly games, and doing something good with them. And that's something we may have to revisit now that I'm talking about it.
Yes, I found the proper itch site and
Hmm.
Twitter. It is Beating the Binary from my
Mm.
friend Moss, who, and some of the games. There's a game that it is a micro LARP that is basically just a reminder to have something to drink.
Love it.
Is I think I met Moss last year. Did they write the RPG I'm Worried About Wine Moms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one about the drinking, it's called I Need Your Strongest Potions.
Good. Incredible.
Yeah, that's another one where like just hearing the title, I'm like, all right, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one that's called Writing the Ley Line, where it's another micro LARP where the entire thing is about imagining that as you're like going on public transit to get to work, that you are traveling through this like magical transportation system. It's like a way of like brightening your day. Like it's like and it just bringing imagination and playfulness into your normal life.
Incredible. Well, we're gonna get the call soon that the stream is ending, so I wanted to take time to say thank you to everyone who called in. Thank you to Double Exposure and Metatopia for allowing us this platform. I'm Taylor. I'm on Twitter at Leviathan Files. And why don't we close out with some sayonaras?
Yeah, Jack Rosetree, and I'm Jack Rosetree basically everywhere.
So, Olivia Montoya, you can usually find me going by Meta Paradox, but on Twitter, I'm Paradox Revealed, and oliviamontoya.com. You can find all my stuff there.
Awesome.